Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. A city set in a hill can't be hidden." Hi, I'm Ken, lead pastor of Village Chapel. We're located in Kannapolis, North Carolina. We want to share with you our vision and mission and values.
One of the things we're passionate about here is worship, and the other thing we're passionate about is prayer. When we're building a community that loves to worship and loves to pray, possibilities are endless.
We see a family as a unit, not individuals. What we want to do is we want to bring the family together. So everything we do here, whether it's children's ministry, men's ministry, women's ministry, we want to always focus back on the family unit. And one thing we like to say is we want to build a village full of strong families.
We're passionate about leadership, developing leaders who are servant leaders to equip the body to do the works of ministry. We're also passionate about church culture. We want people to belong before they believe.
You know, when we come together on Sundays, one of the things that we value is community. We love being around each other, we love fellowshipping with each other, but more than anything, we just love each other.
Our mission is to help people to become faithful followers of Jesus. We do this through loving, serving, and sharing Christ. All of life reproduces except for the American church. We want to re-church America by planting churches. Come join us at Village Chapel. Come be a part of the village.
Hey, so this is the second time I've given a message in my entire life. You're all very welcome. So today's message is called Hills and Valleys, a Transfigured Perspective. And I get it. Some of you are looking at me like, transfigured? Jordan's been using that word at the day calendar, you know? But I promise that I'm not going to talk about the Transformers. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about them a little later. Like Autobots roll out, you know what I mean? No, but when I say transfigured, I'm referring to the transfiguration of Jesus. Has anybody ever heard of that, the transfiguration? Couple. Cool. So we're going to have a lot of new trips down the Transfiguration Highway today. I like it. So it's talking about the transfiguration of Jesus. So what is the transfiguration? Some of you may remember it from the Gospels because all three of the synoptic gospel writers refer to it in their Gospels. And when I say synoptic, I'm talking about Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And yeah, I know. We'll bring Karen back. Excuse me, Jordan. There's 4 Gospels. There's 4. Pilates, pedicures, peppermint mochas, and power naps. That's Karen's 4 Gospels for you guys. Okay, Karen's done for the day. I'm not going to bring her back, all right? The Transfiguration is something that happens in all 3 of the synoptic Gospels. In Matthew, Mark, and in Luke, it is referenced, and it's even referenced a little later on in Peter's second letter. Who was there? This is kind of cool. So Jesus, Simon Peter, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, some like to call them the sons of thunder. I think it's way cooler. So, if you've ever seen The Chosen, there's a really cool moment where Jesus gives them the name, sons of thunder. It's pretty cool to see. So a little bit more context here. They go up a high mountain in Lower Galilee. Some theologians believe that mountain to be Mount Tabor, which is really cool. If you look throughout the Bible, there's a lot of awesome things that happen on the top of mountains. I'll just leave that there for now. All right, so if you have your Bibles today, we're going to turn to Matthew 17. We're going to read verses 1 through 7. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter with him, James and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said, "Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them and said, "Get up." And then he said, "Don't be afraid." Okay, we can just take a breath for a second, because I don't know about you, but that's a lot in 7 verses. I mean, think about that. Think about it. This is the only time in recorded human history that the eternal form of Jesus is ever seen to this point in time. Ever. Ever. And then, if that's not enough, Moses and Elijah show up. And just when you thought it was over, the audible voice of God the Father. That's a lot. And what's crazy to me is in the whole realm of the Bible, this is just a little blip. But it is a big blip. It is a big dent. And sometimes I feel like when I read about the Transfiguration, I wonder why Moses? Why Elijah? You see, Moses represented the law. What did God give to Moses? Anybody? 10 Commandments. That's right. What were the 10 Commandments? Laws. And Elijah represented the prophets. You know what Jesus was? Jesus was the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. This picture's starting to take a little bit of shape, isn't it? Isn't that crazy? So I found this interesting too. Both Moses and Elijah not only represented law and prophecy, but they were defenders of the worship of Yahweh against idolatry. Both of them in their separate times literally had to remind the people of God who He was, what He did, how awesome He was, and not to be pulled away by idolatry. I mean, think about it. The Israelites, when they were enslaved in Egypt, they saw miracles of God firsthand. And then all it takes for them to forget is Moses to leave for a little while, to go up on a mountain, for them to start making idols because they want to worship something. And because they're afraid. Did you remember before the Red Sea even parted what they said? They said, we should just turn around and go back. How quickly they forgot. Does it remind you of somebody? Does it remind you of us? Our culture? How quickly we forget? So, like I said, Jesus was the fulfillment of both the law and prophets. But Moses and Elijah were also defenders of our faith. Foundations and pillars of our faith. So, to understand the Transfiguration a little bit, for me, I had to go backwards. So if we hop back one chapter, in Matthew chapter 16, we see this. Verses 13 through 18 in chapter 16. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, He asked His disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And Jesus said, "But what about you? Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Amen. So I want to pull up some pictures here. This first picture is in Caesarea Philippi. And as you can see, there's a little thing on the side there. It says the Grotto of Pan. That little hole in the rock there where you see the water. Everybody see that? Say, "Yes, Jordan, I see that." Okay, I just want to make sure. Because, Pastor Ken's sitting way in the back there, and he's got some really bad eyes. So I just want to make sure. You see it, Pastor Ken? You good? Okay, he's good. All right. So this is what it looks like today, this Grotto of Pan. The Grotto of Pan in ancient Greece, in the time of Jesus, was also referred to as the gates of Hades. So think about that for a second. Jesus takes his disciples to the region of Caesarea Philippi, and then he asks them, who am I? Who do you say I am? It gets crazier. So Pan, if we want to go to the next picture, this is what it probably looked like in the time of Jesus. It looks like a Greco-Roman city. It's beautiful. But sometimes underneath all that beauty lies something super sinister. And that's what the Grotto of Pan was, the gates of Hades. Pan was an influence of ancient Greece on Roman culture. Pan was a god of lust. If you can imagine sexual debauchery to the highest extent, that's what happened at his temple, at his grotto. Open sexual activities for anyone to see, and they considered it worship. But he also had an alternative side to him. People tended to see him with lustful desire or with intense fear. That's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, isn't it? And so, he was known as a god of lust and fright. Like I said, public sexual displays, animal sacrifice. They would throw live animals down that giant pit right there. If you want to go to that next image, we can start just get in a little bit. See that little pit right there where we saw earlier, where we kind of saw the openness in the water? They would throw live animals in there, and it was so deep and so dark, you wouldn't hear the animals hit the bottom. They knew that their sacrifice was accepted when they saw the blood coming out through their aqueduct, and they would drink the bloody water. These people were messed up. Does it remind you of anything going on in our country right now? There's a lot of messed up stuff happening. It's not that different. But also with animal sacrifice, like I said, came the deep and intense fear. Who thrives off of fear? Who loves our fear? Yes. Yes. Like I said before, this place was thought to be the entrance of hell on earth. Very well could have been. Very well could have been. So why did Jesus take his disciples here? My humor side of my brain thinks about those 12 guys hanging around there. They're all clean cut. And they're all thinking, man, if my mom saw me here, oh man. Or, man, I'm never going to get back into Jewish school. It's pretty simple why Jesus took them there. He was making a point. I like to think that when Jesus said that to Peter and he said, on this rock I'll build my church, he turned around and he pointed and he said, and the gates of Hades will not have a chance against my church. I like to think that. And I really, you can see it. You can almost see it. The gates of Hades have no chance against the church of Jesus Christ. This is where it gets real. Who is the church? It's you and it's me. So what is he saying? What's he saying? If he is inside of us, we're the church. The gates of Hades, the forces of the enemy, the things that we tend to fear because we don't quite understand them, have no shot. There is power inside of us. There is power inside of a community of believers. Because if there's power just inside of one of us, because we are the church, our bodies are his temple, imagine what happens when a community comes together and they start saying, not only are we the church, we're the church together, we're the church united, and the gates of hell have no shot. Talk about change. Talk about culture. We would be bailing out governments. Orphanages would be fully funded. Homelessness eradicated. That's what happens when the church decides to be the church. When they start to walk in the power that Jesus said we had. Okay, I'm not gonna go off yet. So I'll keep it in there. You know, this isn't the only time in Scripture that the power we have because of Jesus is referred to. It's referred to many times. One of my favorite comes from Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus. And it's in Ephesians chapter 1. We'll just take 19 through 21. And I like to read this in the NLT. I think this is a really cool way that they say this. I also pray that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe in Him. This is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead and seated Him in a place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. Now He is far above any ruler or authority or power or leader or anything else, not only in this world, but also in the world to come. Yeah, you can say amen to that one. Whew. To summarize that, he's saying the same power that conquered death in the grave, the same power that rose again, the same power that is now sitting at the right hand of the Father waiting to come back for us, His bride, lives inside of us. Are you hearing me? Are you recognizing the power we have? We have so much power, and yet we sit like we're scared. We keep our mouths shut because we're good little Christians. But you know what? Jesus turned tables in the temple. He took His followers to the epitome of hell on earth, pointed at it and said, give it your best shot. Come at me, bro. The gates of hell have nothing on us. Nothing. They can try their best, and every time, it's like squashing an ant underneath your hand. You know what's crazy? Paul was not a disciple. Paul wrote that. Paul was not a disciple. He was not a witness to the transfiguration of Jesus. How in the world could Paul write something this audacious? He didn't even see it. It's because Paul's perspective of Jesus was in the right place. Paul saw Jesus, and he saw Him rightly. And he understood that who Jesus said we were, we were. And he also understood that the same power that Jesus said we had, we have. It's not just some sweet speech. It's not just some great phrase. It's not just some powerful verse that is quoted in rhetoric over and over and over again. We have power. We have power. And we choose not to use it. Why? Why? Paul saw Jesus and he saw Him rightly. Paul's perspective of Jesus allowed him to remember the power that Jesus said He had because He was a part of the church. Paul's perspective of Jesus allowed him to remember these things. Literally in the face of imprisonment and torture and death, if you read Paul's letters, he was always in prison. He was always in danger of getting killed. What can you do with a guy like that? Nothing. What can you do with a person who has seen Jesus, sees Him rightly, and completely understands the power that Jesus says He has? You can't do anything with that person. We're going to kill you. Oh, please do. We're going to torture you. Okay, what's next? Because he knows suffering here is temporary. But the things of Jesus are completely eternal, which is where the power of the transfiguration comes into play. Jesus wanted his disciples to see, I'm not kidding. I'm real. Who I say my Father is, you bet. As the kids like to say, bet. It's real. It's not some pretty story. It's not something that you just heard in Sunday school. It's real. And we have the authority and the power to walk in it. We just have to choose to. Jesus doesn't change. Our perspective does. I'm going to say that again. Jesus doesn't change. His word says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. I don't know about you, but forever does not stop. It keeps going, like the Energizer Bunny, going and going and going and going. Forever does not stop. And if he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he said the same power that conquered the grave that he had that conquered the grave is in us, and he said that the gates of Hades won't stand against his church, oh, it's real. It's real. I want to tell you guys a story. It's a personal story. It's about my life, about my time in ministry. It's crazy. This week, Pastor Ken and Aaron and I had the opportunity to go to ARC conference in Charleston, South Carolina. ARC, A-R-C, stands for the Association of Related Churches. I've worked in an ARC church before. In fact, it was about 5-6 years ago, I was at a pretty large ARC church here in Charlotte, and started working there in October of 2014. October 1st was my first Sunday. It was my first full-time ministry job. Before that time, I had worked in a couple church plants part-time. Was still traveling and leading worship all over the country as much as I could. But this was the first time where I said, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be at this place every Sunday. I'm going to work here. And up until that point in my life, I think I still had that little gleam in my eye. I hadn't really seen much trouble, much trial in my ministry life. So, about 2 years into my job at this church, I'm going to not say the name because I don't think that's fair. Some of the stuff in the culture of the church started to change. I started to feel like I didn't belong. As a matter of fact, I was told that. I was told I was too fat. I was told I wasn't cool enough. I was not something they wanted to see representing their church on stage. And I was the main worship leader. So they essentially charged me with bringing in people that could also do what I did so that I could go to the satellite campus and just not be seen. But they still wanted me to do my day-to-day and keep everything running. I've been a big guy my whole life. Been a big man since the time I came out of my mom. Sorry, Mom. Some of you women that have had children, you get that. Others of you haven't quite got it yet. I was never bullied as a kid. I was big in high school. I played football, baseball. I was in the marching band, which I should have been bullied for, but I wasn't. Sorry, marching band guys. I was there too. I was there too. I was on the drum line at South Rowan. And I graduated in 2008. Graduated 2008. I never was bullied. Not once. It's kind of crazy to think about that, but when you're comfortable in yourself, which I was, people don't tend to mess with you. Also, I was a pretty big dude, so they didn't really want to mess with me. This is the first time in my life, I was in my mid-20s, that I was ever bullied for my size. I started to lose perspective. I let somebody else begin to tell me where all my worth came from. And they did. They told me, and they told me, and they told me, and they kept telling me. So I went on diets, tried to lose weight, went to this fancy weight loss doctor. Nothing kept, nothing took. And so finally it just came to everybody's realization that it was me. There was a problem with me. And when you hear that enough, someone tells you, these were people who were supposed to be my pastors. It was my bosses. There were people that I held in very high esteem, that I thought the world of. And they were constantly telling me there was something about me that wasn't quite good enough, and there was something about me that wasn't enough. And so finally, it dug itself so deep inside of me that it took. I was a worship leader who lost all joy. And I'm supposed to be on stage telling people where their source of joy comes from. I was going through motions. I was living a lie because I'm standing on stage singing, completely wondering what I'm going to do wrong today that I'm going to hear about at staff meeting on Tuesday. This week at our conference, those people were there. The same people. And it's funny, I thought I had moved on. I thought I was fine. I thought I had put it behind me. Then I saw them. And I realized immediately that it wasn't gone. It wasn't behind me. I might have just put it in a little box and sat it, somewhere back about 30 feet that I could never see. But it was still there in that same box. A couple weeks ago, I started having panic attacks. I didn't know why. I hadn't had panic attacks since I worked there. But a couple weeks ago is when Ken told us we were going to art conference. And I didn't know what was going on with me. I didn't put two and two together. But the last time I went to art conference, I went as a member of the staff of that church. I found more encouragement from a conference from people from all over the country while I was on staff at that church than people I actually worked with every day. But I saw those people. I saw them all. Every one of them. They're still there. And when I saw them at our first night session. And I actually think Aaron noticed something was wrong with me, but I didn't say anything. Because he looked over at me and he said, "Hey man, are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I was just quiet. And I was completely secluded into myself. Because the instant I saw them, all of that came rushing right back into me. You're not good enough. You're not enough. Everything you do is not quite there. And even that night, I went back to my hotel. Pastor Ken and Aaron were staying with Pastor Doug, who came up here a couple weeks ago. Went back to my hotel, and I was, again, completely alone. I texted my family, and I said, "Please pray for me." My mother and my grandmother, they walked through that whole season with me. And when I tell you it was hell on earth, I'm not exaggerating. I would come home from church on Sundays, and I would sit down at our table for lunch, and before I could even put food in my mouth, I would be weeping. There was one Sunday, I remember it was clear as day. It was towards the end of my time there. I came home. I sat down. And I was so sick to my stomach with fear and anxiety that I couldn't even bring myself to eat. And if you know me, that's not normal. I mean, really, it's not normal for me. There's food. Yo, let's go. But I sat down at that table, and all it took was my mom looking at me and saying, "Will you finally tell me what's wrong?" I kept it all inside. I didn't tell them anything. They knew that there was something going on with me, but I don't think they really knew what. And then that day, I remembered it was a Sunday in July, Sunday afternoon in July. Everything I had pent up for 3 years just came washing out. And it was like a cleansing. I was so broken. I'd forgotten where my worth came from. My perspective was not where it should have been. So to finish the story, the next morning I go back to the conference and I'm thinking, Lord, it'd be really great if I didn't have to see them again today. And I hadn't seen them all morning. We were actually getting ready to leave. We were kind of wrapping up our part of the conference, and we're standing kind of in the middle of their giant lobby. This is a massive church in Charleston. It's called Seacoast. And there's these two double doors, kind of like those doors, except they were all glass and super modern looking and way cooler because it was a cool building. And they were open, and there's this little patio with their little baptismal that looks like a tiny pool. And out on the other side of the baptismal, there's this glass barrier. And there they were, all sitting at a table, laughing and eating, having a great time. And I'm standing here. Pastor Ken's right here and Aaron's right here, and I'm completely paralyzed. Ken looks over at me and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" Because I think, Ken's a pastor. And I told him, I said, "Do you remember what I shared with you about this group of people I worked with?" Because I'd shared all this stuff with him. And I said, "They're here. And I don't know what to do." I said, "I feel like I want to talk to them. And then I feel afraid. And I hate that I feel afraid." And then Ken said, "Well, you want us to go with you?" And I said, "Yes, I do, but I think I should go alone." And he said, "Well, do you want us to come a little after you get there?" I was like, "Yes, I do, but I think I should go alone." And then he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "You want me to pray for you?" And he and Aaron, right there on the spot, prayed for me. And I can't tell you what that meant to me. It was the beginning of something really amazing that happened within those next 10 minutes. It was the first step of something beautiful. So after they pray, I kind of shift my jacket, try to make sure I'm looking all right, And I walk outside, and I start walking towards them. And as I'm getting close, pastor's wife sees me, and I could hear her say, "Hey, is that Jordan?" And as soon as she said that, they all stood up, and they turned around like they were the happiest people in the world to see me. I did not expect that. I did not expect that at all. But the second one of the associate pastors hugged me, it was like everything that I had left from that experience, left alone, thought that it was resolved but wasn't, it fell off of me. And to tell you, I felt 1,000 pounds lighter. And you know what I think the Lord was doing? He had a plan. There was a reason that it was this week, the week that I'm speaking. And as I finished up the conversation with them, I turned around and I was walking back to Ken and Aaron. And they're both just like smiling, like, man, that was awesome. And I'm like, I was still feeling everything good. All these emotions were inside of me, just like about to boil. I was about to completely lose it. And so they said they had to go somewhere. I was like, well, I'll meet you at the car. So I'm walking back to the car. Before I could even get down the steps by where the bookstore was, I'm just sobbing. And I'm walking and sobbing and thanking the Lord, and I'm just completely overwhelmed by the presence of God. My perspective was put back right. See, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take some incredible, crazy, horrible bullying story or something like that to shift our perspective. It could just be that somebody got your order wrong. As my friend David likes to tell me. You see, Jesus is the same in the hills as he is in the valleys. The thing that changes is our perspective of him. We forget the second we leave that hill and we start into a valley. And trust me, those valleys are going to come in your life. I'm not going to tell you they're not going to come. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat anything for you. You're going to have hills. You're going to have valleys. Some valleys are going to be really deep and dark and scary, but let me tell you, the gates of Hades can't stand against you. Some hills are going to be so high you can barely breathe because the oxygen level, you're going to think you're in heaven. You're going to have a contact high. But then there's the valleys that just happen in the day-to-day. And they're going to come. But I guess my challenge to you today is the same challenge that I was completely worked over and wrecked by was this. Don't let your perspective of Jesus change from the hill to the valley. See him and see him rightly. Remember the source of your joy. Remember who he said you were. Jesus doesn't change. Our perspective does. I have this video clip here for you I want to share. I'm going to have Dwayne go ahead and turn the music channel up before I play it, just in case, because sometimes they'll start and the music not up.
Mary. Mary of Magdala.
Who are you? How do you know my name?
Thus says the Lord who created you, and he who formed you. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine.
He called me Mary. He said, I am his. I am redeemed.
And it was so? Who did this?
I don't know his name. And even if I did, I could not tell you.
Why not?
His time for men to know has not yet come.
It's time for men. He performs miracles and seeks no credit? What does he look like? Is he a member of Sanhedrin? Would you at least know him if you saw him again?
I don't know why I am sharing this with you. I don't understand it myself. But here is what I can tell you. I was one way. And now I am completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him.
I love that. I want to just notate what she says there at the end. I was one way. And now I am completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. I want to go back to Matthew 17. We're going to start at verse 5. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. And he said, "Get up." And then he said, "Don't be afraid." We have nothing to fear. Remember who he said you were. Remember the power he says you have. Just have these three things. We're going to start from listen to him, which is what God said. Will we listen to him? Will we choose to believe what he says about us? Will we choose to believe we are who he says we are? Will we choose to walk in the power that he gave his life for and that he left for us until he comes again? Will we get up? Will we brush ourselves off and start walking in that power? And finally climb that hill from the valley. And the last thing he says is, don't be afraid. You see, we have nothing to fear. The gates of Hades have nothing on us. The same power that conquered the grave lives in us. And you are loved. You are so loved. And today, if you've never had an opportunity to meet that love, he's here. His name is Jesus. And he's calling you his. And he's saying, don't be afraid. You're mine. And today, maybe you're on the opposite end of that spectrum. Maybe you just forgot who you were. This world is a place that can bog us down. It can berate us with things that tell us who we are that are not of God. Today, maybe you just need that reminder. Nothing can come against you. You have the power of Christ inside of you. He loves you. So if that's you today, this space is open. We're going to sing one more song together. If you come down front, that's awesome. If not, if you stay in your seat or you sit there and worship, I don't care what you do. I just care that you remember. And when we walk out of here today, we walk out of here carriers of, and witnesses of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I say that every Sunday, but I'm telling you, there's power in that. And we take that everywhere we go. Our transfigured perspective. Let's pray.